At the core of world spirituality teaching is what's been called wake up, grow up, show up, lighten up, open up. That's the whole teaching. And I want to talk to you about what each of them means. Wake up means to wake up to your true self. Wake up means to move beyond the narcissistic self-involvement with your own contracted story. Most people live lives around their contracted self. They spend 95% of their mind time thinking about the petty details of some part of their story. And they can't see a wider picture. They are their own self-context. But when you wake up, you actually wake up to a deeper truth. You wake up to the truth that actually, I'm not only a skin-encapsulated ego. I'm sitting here with my friend Eric, who's filming. If I would say, my name is Eric, so that'd be a little funny, and Eric would think I'm telling a joke. That's funny, he thinks he's Eric. If I'd say it twice, he'd say, well, he's telling a joke again, it's not that funny this time. If I do it a third time, he's just a little annoyed. But if I keep doing it for like an hour, he calls Shahat, my good friend who set up this time of filming, and he says, Shahat, and I heard he was a wonderful spiritual teacher, but he's actually insane. And Shahat says, why? He thinks he's Eric. And Shahat says, no, he doesn't really think that. And then when he keeps saying it, she realizes, oh my God, he really is insane. Because what does it mean to be insane? To be insane is not to know your identity. It's not to know who you are. Now stay with me, okay? For me to think that I'm Eric, that's a detail problem. And we're both men. He's a little taller than I am. He's better looking. But basically, we're pretty similar. So that's a relatively small miss. But to actually think that I'm only a skin-encapsulated ego, separate from all that is, and not realize that actually my true self is the true self, that my true self is essence, that I'm an inextricable, indivisible, essential part of all that is, the seamless code of the universe, not to realize that all of the power and all of the glory and all of the love and all of the love intelligence of the world actually flows through me, that I'm part of the love intelligence of the all, not separate in any way, not to know that I'm fully part of and to think that I'm actually a part, that's to be asleep. So to wake up is to wake up to knowing the true nature of reality, to blow your mind as a separate mind, as an alienated mind, and to wake up to your enlightenment. That's the first step, waking up as true self. And in world spirituality, you can adopt or deploy any number of practices, which will be outlined in the World Spirituality Practice book that I'm privileged to be writing in this moment with Tom Goddard, who's a close student and friend, where we're going to talk about and offer 10 major practices for this bucket of wake-up practice. The second major dimension of world spirituality is grow up. Now, growing up is something else. Growing up means to grow up to higher and higher levels of consciousness. So, for example, I might at one level of consciousness have a magical interpretation of the world. At another level of consciousness, a higher level, I might move to a mythic interpretation of the world. So magic it's based on bloodlines and magical associations between people and relationship between people in the clan and the earth on which I live, which gives me kind of a magical protection. And that's all legitimate. Those are all legitimate insights, but they're partial. Right? There is magic in land. There is connection to my land. Of course there is. But by itself, a magical interpretation of the world is woefully insufficient. So I move to a mythic level in which there's an organizing system that interprets reality, which might be a great religion or a great tradition. And I experience myself as part of this larger community. So that's a mythic interpretation. I might then move to a rational interpretation of reality, where I'm beyond identifying myself by my mythic membership in a particular church, and I'm part of this more rational enlightenment where we're all governed by universal moral principles that aren't owned by any particular church. And I might move from there to another level of consciousness, which is far more multicultural, right? Which actually recognizes the unique contributions of every culture and honors them in a whole new way. And I might move from that to an integral consciousness, in which actually I take the best of every level of consciousness and I integrate it at a higher level. I take the best of pre-modern wisdom, the best of modern wisdom, the best of postmodern wisdom, and I integrate it at a higher level of consciousness, and I begin to practice, right, and to live and act at a much higher level. So those are levels of consciousness. Or, for example, in moral development, you go from egocentric, care and concern for myself, ethnocentric, expanded care and concern for my tribe, my people, world-centric, an expanded sense of care and concern for the whole world, all peoples, or cosmocentric, an even more expanded sense of care and concern where I actually identify with all sentient beings, with past, present, and future, with divine source. Right? So those are expanding levels, right? Ascending levels of moral consciousness. Those are structure stages of consciousness. So to grow up is to grow up to higher and higher levels of moral consciousness, of emotional development. There are higher and higher stages of emotional development, right? Of actual quantitative, qualitatively measured development in all the lines of development. Right, of which the most important, right, is the line of moral development. Right? I might also develop cognitively, higher and higher, more complex structures of thinking, right, of forming thought. Piaget, right, measure those lines of development. Right? I might develop to higher and higher structure stages of leadership. So those are all levels of growing up. And the core growing up is to go to higher levels of consciousness, right, in your ever-increasing, ever deeper view of the world, your worldview. You move from magic, right, to mythical, right, to rational, right, to pluralistic. Right? That was the multicultural level I talked about before, to integral. And each of those represents a higher level of consciousness. That's to grow up. Now, how do you do it? Well, to wake up, we know. To wake up, there's a whole series of practices developed by the great traditions. To grow up, we're now developing, right, new practices that allow you to grow up. And in the World Spirituality Practice book, we'll outline a whole series of grow-up practices which spur, which spark, which catalyze growing up. The third dimension or facet of world spirituality practice, right, is to show up. And to show up is to show up as your unique self, to identify your unique gifts, to fulfill your unique obligation, to see as the eyes of God, right, through your unique perspective. So showing up as unique self, right, is the third bucket. Now, of course, these are related, because when you fully wake up as true self, at a high level of consciousness, at a high stage of consciousness, at world-centric and above, you realize that your true self is actually unique. Right? So your unique self begins to come online. But doing the really work with unique self to identify the precise parameters of your unique self, right? To really clarify your unique perspective, to identify your unique gifts, to respond to the unique needs by fulfilling your unique obligation, right? That's the work of show up. Lighten up, number 4, right, is shadow work. Is to lighten up the darkness. Right? To lighten up means to actually identify the unique place you mess up in the world, your unique shadow, to identify your unique shadow, and then to learn how to follow your unique shadow back to your unique self. Everyone has a unique wound and a unique shadow, and those are related. When you identify your unique wound and your unique shadow, then that allows you to transform something essential in the source code of your life and to actually bring your unique self back online. And so we identify practices in the World Spirituality Practice book, both for showing up, how do you identify your unique self, identify your unique obligation, and for lightening up, right? What's the process through which you follow your shadow back to your unique shadow, back to your unique self? And finally, there's open up. And open up is to open up as love in the world. To open up open up your embodied self. To open up your sensuality, to open up your sexuality, and whatever for you is the right committed context for love and sexuality, sensuality, the full range of emotion to express itself. And here again, there's a series of understandings and technologies. There's a teaching that I've developed and really developed it from my lineage tradition, which I call the 3 stations of love. And the 3 stations of love is to be able to identify what station of love you're at, level 1, level 2, and level 3, which is enormously helpful. There's understanding the nature of love, love as perception, love as giving, and love as openness, which is the trinity in understanding the nature of love. There's the 3 faces of love, which are love in the first person, living as love in the second person, being in love with other, love in the third person, which is love as the eros of evolution, right? It's the love that moves the sun and the stars. It's the love that moves atoms, right, to become molecules and molecules to become cells, all the way up till the triune brain, to the human being. And then love is what moves the human being as an evolutionary force to higher and higher levels of consciousness. So that's, right, the 3 faces of love. So within Open Up, you have 3 trinities. You have the 3 faces of love, love in first person, second person, and third person. You have the 3 meanings of love, love as giving, love as opening, love as perception, right? And finally, you have the third trinity, which is this deep sense of the 3 stations of love, which are falling in love, the initial ecstasy. Then it's followed by individuation. It's followed by falling out of love, as it were, remaining in the relationship, but without the same initial ecstatic burst when you begin to do the work, right? The work of loving. And then level 3, when you kind of re-fall in love, but at a higher level of consciousness. And we've called those stage 1 submission. You submit to. Love overwhelms you and overtakes you. Ecstatic, delightful. Level 2, separation. Right? You now separate. You now have perspective again. You've re-individuated, and you stay in the relationship, and you do the work of loving. And level 3, sweetness. And sweetness meaning that place where we re-merge again in love in a higher, more gorgeous, more deep, more profound, even non-dual union. And I took those 3 names, submission, separation, and sweetness, from the Baal Shem Tov, my lineage tradition master. But you have a similar expression, right, in developmental theory, where you have identification, level 1, disidentification, level 2, and level 3, integration, where you re-identify and integrate at a higher level. So you're in a family system. You can't think of yourself outside the family system. You're one with it. Then you disidentify from the family system. You now see yourself as separate from the family, although you remain part of the family. And then level 3, you reintegrate into the family at a higher level, right, where you're no longer unconsciously part of the family. You're in some sense choosing the family. You're integrated at a higher level. And so these are the 3 stations of love. And so what do we have? Let's look at it. We have wake up, grow up, show up, lighten up, open up. These are the core structures of world spirituality teaching. Now, of course, the names aren't that important, right? Wake up, grow up, show up, lighten up, open up are labels. They're lovely branded labels in the most beautiful, elegant sense of the term, to allow someone to hold easily, right, the teaching. The teaching comes from 2 core places. It comes from unique self-teaching and 3 stations of love teaching, unique self-teaching and love teaching, which I've developed over the years with wonderful interactions with people that I've discussed in other formats. But it's the core unique self-teaching, and it's integral theory. So integral theory, unique self, and 3 stations of love, right, and 3 understandings of love, right, come together to form, right, the matrix of world spirituality practice, which is really exciting. It's fantastic. And what you do is, in each one of these 5 buckets, you need practices. Now, of course, each person is going to define, as it were, their own religion, meaning each person is going to define which practices they choose. Each person is going to do different wake-up practices and maybe different show-up practices. right, in different grow-up practices and different lighten-up practices and different open-up practices. And at different times in a person's life, they might focus on either wake up or grow up or show up or lighten up or open up. So there's a profoundly unique self dimension to all the teachings, and all the teachings revolve around unique self. You ultimately wake up, right, to your unique eyes, right, which is the full awakening. You awaken ultimately to unique self, which is the unique eyes of true self. Your highest growing up, you grow up into unique self. You show up as unique self. You lighten up by following your unique shadow back to your unique self. And love, right, is in second person a unique self-perception. In first person, you live as love, but you live uniquely as love. And you are, in third person, the unique expression of the evolutionary eros. Right? Love, you are a unique expression of the love intelligence of all that is. So third person, love intelligence, uniquely expressed as you. Second person, right, the love as a unique self-perception of other. First person, how I uniquely show up as I am love uniquely. I'm a unique expression of love in the world. So unique self is the animating teaching of all five, and you begin to see how unique self and integral theory come together, right, in this larger frame. So that's the cornerstone, right, of world spirituality practice.